Most organizations implementing new ERP software are looking to standardize their business processes. They want to have a common operating model, a common set of business processes to improve their business, which makes sense, but it's a lot harder than you think. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation and ERP initiatives. And one of the most common refrains we hear from clients when they first hire us is we want to implement new ERP software, but we want to do it in a way that creates commonality in our business processes, allows us to standardize, and allows us to improve and integrate the way we do business. And on the surface, this makes total sense, and I fully understand and support the idea of using ERP software to drive standardized processes. But the problem is it's a lot harder than you think, and there's a lot more risk than you think. It's going to increase the amount of time, money, and resources required to make the project successful. And it's also going to increase your risk profile, and perhaps most importantly, it's going to create a lot of heartburn, resistance to change, and chaos within your operations. At the end of the day, standardization isn't just about creating a common set of technologies and tools. It's also about changing well-established business processes that you already have in place. And it also entails changing the way people have done business for a long time. So it's a lot more than just setting up new technology. There's a big impact and a big risk, both operationally and organizationally. So that's what we'll talk about here today, is what the challenges are with standardization and how you can navigate that goal and that vision throughout your ERP implementation. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to share a little bit of information about Third Stage Consulting and who we are. Third Stage Consulting Group is an independent, technology-agnostic provider of consulting services to help clients through their digital transformations. We help with digital strategy and software selection, as well as implementation planning. And during implementation, we provide services related to program management, organizational change, business process improvement, as well as enterprise architecture. These are just some of the services we provide. We have offices in North America as well as Europe and Asia Pacific. So if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to check out our resource center, which includes a number of resources that will help you through your digital transformation, and you can access that for free using the QR code here or the links below. You can also reach out to me directly if you'd like to discuss your digital transformation and brainstorm ideas on how to improve where you're headed on your journey. Now let's jump back into today's content. Let's start off with understanding why organizations typically want to standardize their business processes and to create a common set of business processes and technologies and tool sets. The main reason why organizations typically want to do this is because they've grown a lot over the years. They've acquired other companies, they've entered new markets, they've expanded, they've changed the way they do business. And oftentimes what happens is you get a proliferation of different ways of doing business. One exception becomes 5 exceptions, which becomes 10 or 100 exceptions over time. And so organizations just tend to organically morph into a very disparate set of processes and systems until one day the executive team and others within the organization look up and say, hey, we're doing business 100 different ways. Wouldn't it be great if we could do business one way and one way only? That will create a better customer experience. It'll provide more efficiency and profitability to the company. It'll make the lives easier for our employees because now they aren't trying to guess which process to follow. And ultimately, it allows us to integrate our data and our systems and our overall workflows within technology. So on paper, this sounds great. This is what a lot of organizations want. A final reason why organizations oftentimes want to pursue standardization is because software vendors oftentimes sell standardization as this utopia vision of how things could be with the organization by using their technology. More specifically, software vendors sell this idea of best practices. They claim that their software has best practices that will allow you to do business the same way. Now, this is a topic for a whole nother video, which I have covered on my YouTube channel and other videos, but software best practices simply don't exist. There's the way software works, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's best practice for you as an organization. But regardless, the fact that software vendors are out there selling this concept leads many to believe that standardization is something that's easier than it really is. And if I had to estimate, I'd say probably 80 to 90% of the clients that approach us to hire our team to help with their digital transformation state standardization is one of the key objectives of the project. So it's completely understandable, it's completely common for organizations to want to do this, but the next question I want to answer in this video is, why is it so difficult? Now, we've talked about why organizations prefer to standardize their business processes and their operating model, but let's talk about the downside. What does this do to your organization, and why is it so difficult, and why is it so much easier said than done to standardize your business processes? Well, first of all, let's back up and look at your organization and ask yourself this. How long have you been doing business the way you've been doing it, for the most part? I know it evolves and changes over time, but if you look back 10 or 20 years, how many of those business processes are still in place today? That's one question you have to ask yourself. The other question you have to ask yourself is, why are you doing things the way you're doing them? Can anyone explain that? Now, a lot of times by answering that question, it'll lead you to the conclusion that yes, we need to improve our business processes and we need to have a standard way of doing things because we can't explain why people are doing things a bunch of different ways for a simple or a common business process within our organization. Another question you can ask yourself is, how are people going to respond when you tell them that you're going to change their business processes, the way they've been doing things for a long time? And then another question you can ask is, how long is the average tenure of your employees? Organizations that have highly tenured employees that have been with the organization for 10, 20, 30 years, those people generally have a harder time changing because the way they do things is so embedded in their DNA and the way they operate day to day that it's just going to be harder to change no matter how well-intentioned those people are. So those are some questions you can ask yourself to understand the difficulty of standardization, as well as understanding why you might want to standardize. But if we dive in even further, we can look at some of the reasons why this concept of standardization is so difficult. First of all, change is difficult to begin with. Any organization is going to have trouble changing to some degree, some more than others, but every organization will have that challenge. Second of all, business processes that have percolated and developed over time tend to be pretty well established within the organization, which makes it difficult to change those processes. Another reason is because organizations diversify and grow over time, and they end up developing different ways of doing different business processes because they have different customers, they have different product lines, they add new service offerings to the mix, they enter new markets geographically. So there's a lot of different reasons why organizations develop this proliferation of different processes and workflows, leading them to want to swing the pendulum back the other direction, which is, let's just standardize everything. But changing those processes is very difficult. And then finally, changing people is very difficult. When you talk about changing a majority of your organization to fit some sort of standard common operating model, that is a huge, massive disruption to people. Not only in terms of how they conduct their business processes, not only in terms of which technologies and tools they use, but also in terms of the way their job is designed. If you think about something like artificial intelligence and using artificial intelligence as part of your standard process and workflow, that's just a big change for people. That's a big new way of thinking that's not going to happen overnight. In fact, you're probably going to implement that new technology a lot faster than you're going to get people to learn how to become comfortable with that technology. So when you look at people, process, and technology, all three of those dimensions are difficult when it comes to standardization. Not impossible, but very difficult. So the next question that I want to answer is, what do we do? How do we navigate the difficulties that I just described, and how do we ensure that our digital strategy takes these risks and challenges into consideration? So now the question becomes, how do we navigate this whole difficulty of standardizing business processes? How do we make sure this doesn't create total chaos within the organization? How do we ensure that we don't disrupt our operations because we're trying too hard to standardize things? This all starts early upfront in your digital strategy and also in terms of your phase 0 implementation planning. So before you ever start deploying new technology and before you start bringing in the technical consultants to start designing and building stuff, we always encourage clients to take time up front to do that phase 0 implementation plan. This is where you can start to do things like segregate your business processes and prioritize your business processes. So in other words, not all business processes need to be standardized. There's some that are more important than others. There's some back office functions, for example, that might make a lot of sense to go through the pain and the difficulty of standardizing because it's worth it. It's worth the efficiency gain you're going to get. You're not losing out on providing a better customer experience to your customers and that sort of thing. And so you might isolate some of your standardization efforts to back office functions that don't touch the customer. On the flip side, there may be some customer-facing processes that you want to have differentiated. You might have different divisions or different locations in your organization where you're going to do things differently because you have a different customer base. You're trying to meet different market demands. You're trying to meet different regulatory requirements. So there might be some forward-facing reason why you wouldn't want to standardize, But regardless, you want to make sure you have clarity before you ever start the implementation on which processes you want to standardize and which ones you don't. And that's a pretty messy process. It takes a lot of time to get through that decision-making process and that alignment process of getting everyone on the same page related to that. And that's why you want to do that during phase 0 before the meter starts running on the really expensive part of the project, which is designing and building software. So it may behoove you to defer the start of your technical work stream until you get through this alignment exercise of making sure that everyone's on the same page with what processes we're going to standardize, which ones we're not, and when it comes to the ones we are going to standardize, what does that standard model look like? And that's a whole nother layer of complexity. Now we've got to agree on what that standard operating model looks like. And you can just imagine if you've got 10 different departments that do things 10 different ways and you're trying to move to one way of doing things, you're probably going to have 9 of the 10 departments that are unhappy with the way things shake out because it's not their way. And so you want to make sure that you take the time to invest in change management, you take the time to add buffer in your plan to account for that decision-making messiness, and you want to make sure you cover all that before you get into the design and build of software. Once you've made the decision of which processes you're going to standardize and how you're going to standardize, now you need to determine how that factors into your implementation plan. If you're doing a ton of standardization and it's going to be a pretty drastic change for your organization, that's a longer timeline, a much longer implementation timeline than the organization that isn't standardizing as much, simply because not standardizing is the path of least resistance, so it's going to take you less time and money. Now, on the flip side, of course, you're not going to get as much business value, most likely, but it will take you less time and money and risk up front. So we need to recognize what the impact is on the overall implementation plan. And then finally, I'd say the executive team and the project team needs to have a strong stomach, because going through the standardization process creates, again, a lot of noise, a lot of chaos, a lot of frustration. And it's easy to resist change when it's disruptive in that way. So we need to make sure that the executives have a strong stomach and can navigate the storm, if you will. And part of that involves investing in change management. Change management becomes even more important when you're standardizing business processes and making that big of a change within your organization. Now, everything I've talked about in this video so far is something that can be addressed and should be addressed during the digital strategy and phase 0 phase of the project. In other words, it's the phase before you begin the technical implementation. And I'm not going to get into it here in this video, but I do have a separate video on my YouTube channel that dives into phase 0 in a lot more detail. You can find that video right here. And in that video, I talk about what phase 0 is and some of the major components that you should consider and ensure you invest in that phase. But be sure to check out that video. I've also included a link below to help you with that. And I've also included a link below to our phase 0 checklist. You can read that on our website. It's free. It's a good way to look at that list of things that you should be doing before you ever start the technical implementation. And many of those things are related to defining your business processes and your level of standardization. So I hope this has provided some context and understanding of the benefits of standardization, the reasons why organizations want to do it, but also what the risks and challenges are, along with how you can navigate some of those challenges and still pursue that state of utopia of common business processes, but do it in a way that's realistic and isn't setting your organization up for failure. Instead, you want to be setting yourself up for success. So I hope this has provided some good guidance. I hope you found this information useful, and I hope you have a great day. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients through the role. You also want to understand, once you've made that decision, start that over. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. Fall over.